Hey everyone, and welcome to today's review of Nintendo Switch Sports, which has already been out for around 4 days or so. I wanted to fully play the entire game before I made a review, and now that I've done that, welcome to this review of Nintendo Switch Sports, and if you should buy it or not. So, let's get right into it. Let's start off with bowling, my favourite sport in this package. Bowling remains unchanged from Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. It's still so simple yet satisfying to knock down all the pins to get that strike or spare that you surely need. Switch Sports also added special on-screen flourishes to the animations. This is also for every sport, it's not just bowling, but it adds a really nice touch to knocking down pins. For example, when you throw the ball and it makes contact with the pins, you have like little blue sort of effects that bounce off the ball. It's just really cool and really good to look at. Bowling can now be played with up to 4 players locally, and a welcome change is allowing all 4 players to play simultaneously on split screen instead of waiting for all players to play individually, but you can still do that if you want to, where you have one Joy-Con and you pass it around. Bowling in Switch Sports also has 2 new game modes, Survival Bowling and Special Bowling. In Special Bowling, you'll be playing bowling against challenging lanes that provide obstacles such as narrow bridges, moving bridges, walls and ramps. This adds a fresh new challenge and gives solo players a reason to come back and retry their luck at beating their high scores. These special courses can also be attempted in 3 difficulties: beginner, intermediate or advanced, with the latter in advanced being really difficult. This actually gave me quite a challenge and I just really liked it in general. And finally, the best for last, online survival bowling. This is essentially Wii Sports' version of Battle Royale. In Switch Sports Survival Bowling, you'll be playing against 16 players online. After 3 lanes, half of the players with the lowest scores will be knocked out. This continues until there's about 3 or 4 players depending on the score. This all culminates in the final players in the final round standing off facing against a final bowl, where the player with the highest points wins. In this final round, you can keep going as long as you get strikes or spares. I think if you get strikes, you keep going indefinitely until you no longer get a strike. And as I said, the player with the highest score wins the game. Survival bowling is definitely my favourite sport in the package in general. It was just really fun, and in my opinion, it's really addictive. Next up is a new sport to the Nintendo Sports series, being Badminton. This is the most simplistic sport in the package, but that's not really a bad thing. 2 players face off in a game of badminton, where you can hit the shuttlecock, perform slam shots, or perform cheeky little drop shots to catch your opponent off guard. I really liked doing the drop shots because what I do is sort of hit the shuttlecock side to side to catch the opponent off guard, and then do a little drop shot so they have to dive to get it so I can then slam it onto the other side of the arena. I really liked badminton, but I do think some more complexity in maybe some possible side modes would have been welcome indeed, as it does feel a bit bare bones compared to some of the other sports. Now, from the most simplistic sports to the most complex, volleyball. Volleyball is also one of the new sports added to Nintendo Switch Sports. In volleyball, you'll play in double matches to volley, set and spike the ball over the net to score points. Players will serve to the second player will then set, which allows the other player to then spike the ball to score a point. On the other side of the net, however, the opposing team can then block jump shots by essentially jumping, where you lift the Joy-Con up to block the shot. You can also move side to side whilst doing this, and it was really fun and really satisfying to just block a shot and score a point. This was, in my opinion, the most complex sport, as it did take me a couple of games to actually get my head around everything, as some of the motion controls and techniques are quite complex compared to the other sports. But this is a good thing though, because it shows that Switch Sports houses a variety of sports ranging in complex ones to extremely simplistic ones, such as badminton. Overall, I really did like volleyball, but it's not exactly one of my favourites compared to the others. Tennis is yet another classic sport returning from Wii Sports. There's not really much to say here. Tennis is exactly the same, with doubles games being either played with 4 players, or double matches being played with 2 players, with ghost clones acting as the second players that you can control independently with the same swings. Tennis is another simple sport that I did find that with tennis the motion controls did sometimes let me down when returning shots. It either just wouldn't register it or would register it too soon. I find that with the Joy-Cons in general, the motion controls in the entire game are a lot more responsive, and in games like bowling and badminton I found that they were a lot more precise when scoring points and obviously rolling the ball. However, with tennis I did feel like even the slightest movement would essentially make my character swing, hence missing the ball. But I still really like tennis though. It's a fan favourite, and at the end of the day it's still Wii Sports tennis. In Switch Sports it's exactly the same, and you're going to have fun with it regardless. Now for football, another new sport added. If you've ever played Rocket League, then football in Switch Sports is very similar here. In football you can sprint with a sprint meter similar to the one in Breath of the Wild, where you have like a little circle that obviously depletes over time. You can freely control the camera in 360 degrees, you can kick the ball, perform diving headers, jump and then jump kicks as well, and you can also pass the ball to other players. Now, I've heard from other YouTubers and reviewers that this was a lot of people's least favourite sport in the package. I'd have to disagree, as I really liked this mode. It's fun and competitive. My only complaint that would be that the players move too slowly and the sprint meter goes out far too quickly, causing matches to remain at a stalemate with players running around after the ball for minutes on end. But it's still really fun though. Football games can also be spiced up with a golden ball that's thrown onto the pitch that, if scored with, can provide double points to your team. Football also has another mode. If you bought the physical edition of Switch Sports, or if you have a spare leg strap from Ring Fit Adventure, you can play a shootout mode where you use the leg strap attached to your leg to kick the ball. This mode works fine, but it's very bare bones, as all you're doing essentially is kicking a ball into the goal with no real difficulty or obstacles in your way. I think another fun mode here would have been to do a smash the targets mode, but it's not here other than the tutorial. Basically, up to 2 players face up in a shootout mode to kick the ball into the back of the net to score points. The player that scores after 5 kicks and has the most points wins the match. Finally, in terms of the sports, we have Chambara. If you've ever played Swordplay from Wii Sports Resort, then Chambara is exactly the same with a few new twists. For example, you can now select from a regular sword, twin swords to dual wield with, or a charge sword for charge attacks. Sadly, Chambara was actually one of my least favourite sports in the package, which was really surprising to me because Swordplay was one of my favourites from Resort, and it's one of the ones that I actually put the most time in. Although fun can be had here, definitely, it's really tense at times and gets really competitive. Sometimes I found that online players will just spam attacking forward, and there's not really enough time to react, as with blocking, the animation does take a couple of seconds with a delay, meaning that they can just attack you indefinitely until you fall off. But at least blocking is now made obvious, as it wasn't really that obvious in Wii Sports Resort. Blocking, when you actually block now, the sword will glow blue, indicating to the other player that you are indeed blocking, and shows your intentions quite clearly. One thing I did like is if the game goes into a sudden death, then essentially the circular arena that you're playing on the platform will actually shorten, meaning that 1 or 2 hits will actually knock you off. This becomes really tense, and the music also plays sort of a tense tune with a heartbeat going in the background. It gets your blood pumping, definitely. Next up is character customization. One thing I hear people freaking out over in the comments of my previous Switch Sports videos are Miis. Obviously Miis are a staple of Wii Sports, they are essentially what sold the Wii. Well, I'm happy to say that essentially the game lets you customize outfits as well as having Miis selectable. This was shown in the trailer, and I'm very confused as to why people were complaining that they weren't included when when the game was revealed in that Nintendo Direct, Miis were shown off. But yeah, you can select Miis, and you can also change their outfits. Obviously you can't change things like headgear and facial features because of the Mii's head, but you can change anything essentially from the shoulders below, which is great. In Switch Sports you can customize your character's head, facial features, outfits, eyes, and equipment used in each of the sports. also including headgear and titles. The titles work very similar to the passport ones used in Animal Crossing. For example, you essentially have two words that you put together. For example, you could have the pro or something like that. Another options that I like that they've added specifically for Switch Sports are emote stickers. These can be unlocked and then used to communicate or to taunt to other players online, for example showing a crying face or a laughing face. I also got really worried with customization because the way that you unlock new customization options are from a point system. Essentially, after completing each sport online, you'll get anywhere from about 30 to 100 points depending on how well you do or if you win the match. I thought initially that Switch Sports would include paid microtransactions, as if you look, when you go to essentially unlock new items, it's laid out very similar to something like Fortnite, where you have a set of items and it's something that you'd, for example, you'd buy and then you get the entire set of items. However, here, after you get 100 points, you get essentially a present. You get a customization token, I'm just going to call them for now. You can then use this to unlock random one of the items in the set. At the minute there are only two sets of items, being a cute theme set and a simple themed one. After reaching 100 points you'll be able to lock one item randomly, as I said, and I do think this is good as it sort of keeps you on your toes and it gives you an option to keep coming back to the game for new customization options. Hopefully we get to see more customization options in the future as well, as at the moment, as I said, we only have cute and simple, and these will rotate out each week, and they actually say on, I'm going to say the in-game shop, but it's not really an in-game shop, it actually says how many days are remaining left for that set. Sadly, for all the good things Switch Sport does, there are also surprisingly a lot of missing features from the original Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. This includes there are no pros and no pro meters for single players when you're battling CPUs. For example, in previous games, if you played a CPU, you'd have a graph, and essentially the CPUs would get harder and harder in difficulty depending on sort of what level you were. So yes, there's no overpowered map from Wii Sports, which is really sad, and I just really wish they had included this. No golf, even though it's coming in autumn this year, is surely missed, as its inclusion would have been great to add more value to this package overall. Also, other than bowling with its special mode and football shootout mode, there are no extra training modes or side modes for the other sports. As of making this video, they may be added later in an update. This is a big missed opportunity to give single players more things to do. For example, we could have had a rally mode for tennis and badminton, a target smash mode for football and volleyball, and sadly they did not include the speed slice mode or duel mode from swordplay in Wii Sports Resort to Chambara, which again is a massively missed opportunity. Now, another thing is if you look at the Spocco square map, you'll see building locations that house all of the different sports included in the game. On the map, there are 3 buildings that are not labelled. We know the bottom right one will be golf, and as for the other 2 we can speculate a bit, as I know this is a review so I won't spend too much time doing this. The middle building I think will be baseball, as I'm surprised that this is already not included as it's a fan favourite from Wii Sports. And the top right one could be a water sport such as canoeing or swimming, as it's next to a body of water with boats and docks next to it as well. I think another mode that could have been added was an explorable free range mode. In Resort you could pilot a plane around Woohoo Island and discover different landmarks, compete in dogfights in your plane, or pop balloons. I think a similar mode could have been added to Switch Sports. In football, for example, you can freely move the camera around, walk around and sprint. This could have been used to explore Spocco Square, to discover different landmarks, and maybe compete in foot racing challenges, that sort of thing. But it's really weird because if you look at all of the backgrounds, as I'll go into later, they're all extremely detailed and well polished. This would have been really great in adding different immersion to Spocco Square, as Woohoo Island is such an iconic staple of Wii Sports, as well as other Nintendo games such as Pilot Wings and Mario Kart as well. So now for the final verdict. Overall, I'd have to give Nintendo Switch Sports a 7 out of 10. It's a really good game that shines at its brightest when played at a party locally or with a bunch of friends and or family. in the same room. The magic of Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort has definitely been captured yet again, but Switch Sports is still lacking certain extra modes and flourishes that single player players will really just miss, and it's just not as good in my opinion. These extra side modes made the original Wii games so much more fun. The background art of the levels in Spocco Square are really lively and detailed, with also a few bangers thrown in terms of music, with the background music for football and survival bowling being a couple of my favourites. I really do think you should definitely buy Switch Sports if you have fun playing online or locally in the same room with lots of different friends, say at a party or a gathering, but I cannot recommend the game if you only plan on playing single player without online, as there is just not enough content here to really enjoy the game. Don't get me wrong, I think single players may just play each sport a couple of times and then leave the game and come back to it a few months later, but I think players that are playing online and locally, such as myself, are going to have a lot more fun unlocking things like customization and going through all the different ranking leagues online. But hopefully more sports will come as well as golf. As I explained, we may be getting baseball and possibly a water sport. Anyway everyone, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. What did you guys think of the review, and are you enjoying Nintendo Switch Sports if you already own it? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!